the funding and engagement, stakeholder engagement. So we kind of focused on those things. And the three main thread of activity that we saw in all of the things that could be done was the new path area and the family area that we were going to cover off, and Dale was going to touch on that. Water management and some solar issues around the barn, and then Michele will get into the garden area specifics. So I'd like you to hand over to Dale right now.
Okay. Afternoon, everybody. This is an overall layout of what we were envisioning for your project. So we're talking first about the family area. So this would be the parking area that you have access to. The bridge that you've come across. With the bridge, I think we had taken some video and we saw that there was two very old and very big willows on either side. So those are some things that you're going to have to address, probably taking a large portion of that down, but we'll get into that a little bit later. But first, coming into the barn, you would have a pathway that would lead you to the front entrance, and then also to a family area. So this family area is actually made up of a mandala garden that would use straw bales to define the edges, and would actually raise the gardens up. So if children were in this area, the plants would actually be at their level, and if they're running around or playing, you know, as long as they're not jumping on the hail bales, they're not going to be disturbing the plants too much. Also, in this area, we want to have a kitchen garden. So if you decide to have an outdoor cooking area, the kitchen garden is right here. The pathways that we'll be moving through actually connect the entire farm. Within the family area too, we'd have a sand butterfly, not a sand box. So as you know, the gardeners were gardening, or if you had a workshop here, the children could be engaged in this area here within the sand butterfly. Outdoor oven, sorry, okay. This area here, and I think you had spoken about it just now, that we thought a canopy, possibly a permanent structure or something that you'd have to take down. It depends on, you know, the people who make those decisions. But under the canopy or beside the canopy, you could have an outdoor oven, and we're thinking of a cob oven. And one thing that we were also thinking about is engaging the community. So open house or another workshop, you could call the community in or have the opportunity for them to come in and actually build the cob oven with you. That's a way of engaging them and actually having them take ownership over the space, because working with community gardens, you really want them, because you're not going to be there all the time, you want them to actually feel that it's theirs. So the best way is to get them in there and actually getting their hands dirty to build it. The straw bale, just wanted to, can you see that? The straw bale gardens, you have a few different options where you could actually plant directly into the straw bales, or you could use the straw bales to define the perimeter and then have the plants planted in. And it's something that's attractive to the children, and it's also at the same time, it can be used as a multi-purpose, because you know they're going to be running through here, and if they're running through the garden, they're going to be trampling plants that are below their feet, but now these are actually raised up. Also in the family area, there would be seating areas and also benches where people could have picnics or just have a lunch. You had some apple trees and a few other trees that were right on the edge of this part of the property. It also provides some shade for families or anyone that's at the workshop.
So we've tried to capture a lot of these slides that you're going to see that we've drawn are actually captured in the presentation. The next thing we thought about was when we came to the water management. So we kind of captured this slide here to show where water management sat in the configuration of community garden. And so it's kind of harvesting the water. You mentioned something about 50,000 litres
a day.
Yeah, our calculations, I don't think that the waterworks people might give you 50,000, but the river might actually, or the stream might actually have another thing to do with that.
Yeah. So
we don't think that's viable. So we dug up some statistics here on how. So you're harvesting. We took a baseline. You're going to have to recheck these high water marks. I don't know how bad last year or how good last year was for water, but we kind of took from 60 millimeters to, just shy of 100 millimeters. So So based on those figures, we did some preliminary calculations. So you're going to need water for the garden, and Michelle's going to talk about that and how that fits into our overall plan. But basically, you're going to need to capture your water. And we did some calculations, and we figure you're going to be able to capture between 1,000 to 2,000 gallons and I use gallons because I was shopping online for the actual systems, which is about 3 to 7,000 litres of water per month. So that's what you're going to have available, and we figured you're going to be able to capture that from the roof of the barn, and you're going to have the cisterns as Dell's marked them up here. So you can either bury the cisterns as Brenda's done here on the farm, or you can look at a topside, and then you've got some issues of some pumps on those cisterns to move the water to the actual garden. So for the preliminary, we're just basically, the message is, you're not going to get it from the stream, you better capture your stuff. Yeah, so, and we were getting to the point of doing the calculations, but some of these, you're looking at $2,000 for a cistern, and whether you want to bury it and then the work. So you probably kind of tender out. The other thing is we were looking at your solar panels on the side of the barn. So again, Dell, if you could just point out on the barn, so that she's got the solar panels on the west side. And the reason is that we've when we look at your, look at the farm, what we have is the leaf garden that's actually going to form there. In actual fact, we started to look at this very much, not just the impact on the ground level, but we're looking at it to how your project's going to look like from the satellite point of view, because now you can literally paint a picture, chariots of the gods type of thing. But here we've got the azimuth calculated for sunrise and sunset and noon area, where it was for May the 1st for this year. Then we see it where it is for October, and as you can see, you've still got some good coverage. And this wasn't just for the panels, we're looking actually specifically at the sunrise and the hot spots. And then when you're looking at it in winter time, you've still got some pretty good coverage from the sun. So that's kind of where we were with the garden, and I want to hand it over to Michele, that's got really the most exciting part of what our ideas are.
Okay, so what we have here, we've come from the barn into the pathway.
Can you actually see can you see the screen?
Now I can. Yes, now I can. Yeah.
Jeff, can you see? Just move, or maybe we can make sure you see things.
Yeah, that's perfect.
That's good?
Yeah.
So I'm just going to go quickly around the path. We've created a path on the outside of the garden, which there's going to be a lot of trees that are going to have to come down, and when you take down the trees, you're going to have a lot of branches that you can use for a garden I'll describe here, but also for your mulch. We also thought that some of the trees that are cut could be used for seating throughout the path, so people can just relax, or they can continue their walk. What we have here is a mix of just berries, so you'd have some blueberries, you'd have some currants, a mix of berries that people can harvest when they walk around the garden. Our compost piles are about halfway through so that everybody can access them. What we've created at the entrance is a flagstone path so that it's accessible by wheelchair. And the Hugel culture gardens on either side would be for accessibility. So they could access, so they would have a pathway all the way around that they could reach from either side. And just whatever they chose to plant, they would be right in the front. The path would continue down here with compost. And when we were speaking with you, there was a few concepts. You were talking about feeding a food bank, you were talking about allotted plots, and then one larger plot for everybody. So if we do this, then you could break this down into smaller allotments, or you could make it one big patch, depending on what you do. But either way, you could access from each path. That gives you quite a few options in here. There's quite a few plants that are there already for butterflies, bees, and just wanted to continue that in here, but continue it so that it's not interfering with anybody when they're gardening, but it's still beautifying your space. And we talked about the swallows in the barn, and because there's going to be some renovations in the barn for your workshops, possibly for an office, for the manager, we just wanted the swallows to have a space as well. So in the corners up top, as well as the ends of the garden, we're going to put some swallow habitat for them, and then just around here there's going to be a mix of grasses that they could use, or it's just going to give them a little bit of coverage, a little bit of shelter. Have I missed anything?
The fence.
Oh, the fence is going to have to be rebuilt. There was some material on the outside of the barn that may be able to be salvaged. But what we'd like to do is, you mentioned the trouble with the rabbits, so we were thinking of chicken wire on the inside and buried into the ground a little ways. And then on that chicken wire, a mix of trumpet vine for the hummingbirds to bring another attractor in for the kids, for families to appreciate, as well as a variety of beans. Instead of having the pole beans climbing up a teepee or vertically, they could grow horizontally and cover the fence, which would make that attractive. It's also something that would enable the kids, they could save the beans for the next year to plant, so it'd be something that would get families involved.
Right, so kind of getting to the end, there was a whole bunch of things that we discussed around erosion control, barriers from the highway, existing fruit tree forest, chickens. We kind of had a very similar discussion to the views expressed by the other team, which it's a lot of work, and when it doesn't go well, chickens suffer. So municipal service toilets in the sports field. The short-term thing, you've got enough things to actually get done. So you know it's about winning the war, and not necessarily every battle. You've got the sports field next door. Municipality, if you plug into your usual service of just either, preferably actually having it on that side, so you have facilities that is part and parcel of the current municipal infrastructure. And I don't think we have to prove a point there. I think it's just establishing and winning the important dialogues, or actually kind of defining kind of consensus around that. So that's kind of where we were, and we thought that those heavy hitters in terms of the landscape, the visual, and whatever visual motif we pick to leave. But I mean, if you want to change the structure of that to support some sponsorship and engagement, I think that's actually quite an attractive proposition.
Yeah, and the leaf also, it minimizes the pathway space, so you can maximize your growing space. Also marries an ecologist, you're a permaculturist, so this is also attractive possibly to funders when they know that, okay, well, we can be seen from space, and what we're doing, it has a positive effect. The pathways on the southeast portion, there's actually an old pathway that was going through the forest. That's something that you could look possibly in the long term of clearing up. This is what we're trying to show here, and coming down to the north side. With regards to the highway, we were thinking of planting alder and caragana to create kind of a visual barrier, and then that could also be used as mulch. So you could cut it back and build soil and use that in your garden, in your pathways. We did notice that on this portion of the hillside there was some erosion, so we were thinking of putting some sumac and hawthorn to slow that down and help to build the soil back up, because that could be a potential danger. You did have a small established food forest. I think there was 3 apple trees and 1 pear tree. So we were thinking of possibly adding that, because you have a heat trap right here, and there's not a lot of wind coming through, except through a little bit of a gap that you could actually see the soccer field, and we recommend that you leave that open, because it just kind of allows the airflow to come through. But this is a perfect environment to grow some more fruit trees in. The chickens we were thinking of putting on this side of the barn, but before you do that, you'd have to deal with a little bit of moisture that's sitting there, because on this side there was a lot of water sitting, and you actually had mold coming up the wall. So you'd have to maybe grade the land towards the stream, clear the wood piles that are there, and you can have chickens there if that's something that you decide to move forward with. And then there was also some trees that kind of blocked you from accessing or walking fully around the building, so those may have to also be,
Come down.
have to be cleared out. And just like our last group, we were thinking about creating a living barrier, maybe like a short shrub system that can go across and easy to manage, just so that there's a little bit of definition of, the community and what you're doing here. Accessibility is something that we really talked about, because you spoke about engaging the community. And a lot of times in community gardens, my mother-in-law is confined to a wheelchair, and it took a while before we could actually get a community garden set up where she could actually have access to. So long-term, maybe getting this whole path accessible to people who are in wheelchairs, but short-term, we were thinking just getting these paths here directly to the garden, so that they could actually engage, and keeping them a part of the whole, so that, they're on their wheelchairs, but they're part of the whole community. And we've actually thought about them in our design process, because it is a community. So we want to try and get the children, the family, and everyone else engaged in this process. And looking at those things too, it also opens you up to a wide range of possible funding opportunities to help support that negative $4 bank that we have going right now.
So, in the interest of time, I think let's wrap up there.
Okay, and I think that's pretty much
So,
it.
so we were looking at the major attractors for you, because they're really, the community garden right now your next major challenge and hurdle is to actually get stakeholder engagement. So we've got the slides covered off in a presentation, we can email it to you, and really to get the ideas fermenting of what are the major attractors, because it's the strategy element of what you choose, not to necessarily communicate at this stage, and what you want to communicate to the stakeholders that are going to enable you to move forward. And we feel that not just in the interest of funding, but that this accessibility issue is of a significant, because there's lots of community gardens, but there are not many community gardens that would cater to people that would just give them a whole new lease of life in a day to actually be able to go down to the garden. I think this is quite a significant thing, and a worthwhile thing. And as you've seen in the design that Michele did, it formulates the root and the base of everything, and they have access to it. And we put them right at the base of it, so on either side we can either have the human culture, which is at the mound that can be built for them, or whether they would just have the raised beds based on what they want. So I think that's the base of that, and access with the pathway to the family gardens. I think it's a really, really attractive proposition moving forward, and I think you're going to get lots of interest around that. So we kind of focus on that type of stuff. All of the other stuff is kind of details after you've engaged. So what did you like about that, and how do you feel about the potential?
I